Awesome. Great. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate you joining us today to talk a little bit about AI search in your knowledge base. We've got a lot to cover here in about 30 minutes, so I'm just going to dig right into it. But a quick introduction to myself. I'm Eric Nelson. I'm from Style AI. We are a Zendesk partner that really focuses on the AI ecosystem in customer support. We do a lot of machine learning, a lot of research, and we're going to be actually getting into some of that today so you guys have some action items to take away for improving your knowledge bases. So to get started, why it matters. So you guys might have heard that there is a lot of new terminology that is getting thrown around AI search optimization, otherwise known as AEO. And the main reasoning for it is that there is a lot of clutter that is happening on the internet as more and more content is getting created in the CX space. Everybody's trying to figure out how do we get these machines to be able to communicate more effectively, be able to retrieve more effectively from your Zendesk knowledge bases or other knowledge sources. And what we've been able to find out through a series of research that's been done by us, as well as some of the foundational partners in the space, OpenAI and such, and we'll be referencing some of those white papers here in the chat, as well as in the after action materials, is that a majority of these large language models, whether it be tools that are inside of the Zendesk ecosystem or outside of it, are classifying information into three core categories. That's going to be earned media, brand media, and social media. And this is the first high level of what is happening here. So when you guys are thinking about your Zendesk knowledge base, that is actually considered brand media to these machines because it is directly related to your actual companies. But it actually doesn't, what we're finding, care that much about your brand media. So what we're going to be showcasing here is a few different pieces. And this is really breaking down information into three core areas of informational, consideration, and transactional. So how many of you guys have went to ChatGPT instead of going to a customer's or going to a company's documentation to try to get your answers? I'm sure it's quite a few of you here. So, what we're finding is that more and more of these people are utilizing ChatGPT and Gemini and sources like that to be able to actually search content instead of actually going to where it exists. And what we're finding is that, for these kinds of things that are informational or transactional in nature, that they are falling into one of these different categories. And the main one here is earned. And what earned actually means is information that you guys don't have actually any control over. And that's really unfortunate because you don't have any control over it, you're often getting super stale information that's getting fed into these models, and then your customers are getting told incorrectly. And that's just creating this poor feedback loop and poor experience. But there's some tips and tricks that we can be doing to actually trick these models into actually finding your brand information to be the core sense of truth. So making your Zendesk knowledge base what it is pulling from when users are going to ChatGPT and asking questions about your company. So first, to get into just a couple of the core basic information that we're going to be getting into. So when we're talking about these different sources here, we're finding that the brand docs are only able to be utilized when they are structured incredibly rigidly. And what I mean by that is that you're starting up at the top of your Zendesk knowledge base articles with explaining what the purpose of it is. So, whether it be a brief sentence or two that's really just describing the purpose of the article and then going through in a structured way, step by step, the reasoning for it. And when we think about this, you should be thinking about structuring most of your knowledge content into a form of a tutorial and, a step-by-step action instruction guide of how to accomplish whatever the task is that it is. Now, this is difficult for some of us. If you're in the software space, a lot of it is troubleshooting or explaining where to go in a system. But others of us are in like e-commerce. In e-commerce, it's very difficult to have an instruction-based system when it is really just explaining something as simple as like, where do you go to track your order? But by us actually just being able to put that purpose right up at the top, we're going to be finding a lot of success. So we're going to start by going into the actual classification pieces of this. Now, when we talk about the classification, we're going to first break it down by the model level. So for this research, what has been utilized is the GPT models by OpenAI in both the US and Canada, as well as Google's model series, otherwise known as Gemini, in both the US and Canada. As we can see here, the earned media is what is going to care the most. But fortunately for us, brand media actually outweighs quite heavily for Gemini. Now, this is super helpful because a lot of your customers, when they're trying to find information, are just Googling it. And with Google's new AI summaries that are happening at the top of the web search, this is going to impact it more heavily. So by you guys making improvements to your Zendesk knowledge base, it's going to actually rank a lot higher in the AI search when you are having your customers just go to Google and searching, how do I reset my password for Eric's Cool Company or whatever it might be. And then we actually find that that classification preference changes on a per language basis. Now, this is going to be pretty difficult to see without me zooming in here. Apologies, looks like I can't zoom in this system here. But essentially, what we have been able to figure out is that depending on the language of your content, you are going to have what it matters to those models change quite drastically, and what is the classification that it is given. So for this example here, Google cares about social information about 25% of the time, or 35% of the time, but only for English. And for other languages such as Japanese, it actually doesn't care about social content whatsoever. So as you guys are thinking about the content that you're creating specifically in your Zendesk knowledge base, really start thinking about the localization of it. So think about the languages that you are supporting, and then try to really, even if it doesn't matter if you don't have a ton of customers in that particular language, if it is a language that models really care about from a brand recognition perspective, you should be creating localized content of that as well. And the reasoning for that is it's going to help the model to be able to increase its indice of saying, like, this is important information. And that's going to translate into your primary languages as well, such as English or Spanish or whatever it might be. So if you have a model, if you have a language that cares a lot about that brand recognition, such as Japanese or Spanish, even if you don't have a lot of customers there, I'd highly recommend looking at localized content for it. Great. So we're actually going to start getting into some tips and tricks here. So what are the things that you want to keep in mind? First and foremost, knowledge bases must resemble neutral, explanatory, referenceable materials. Now, this is going to sound super boring to a lot of you, and this is the thing where it's a balancing act here. You need to think about creating content that is great for your customers, but also great for machines. And having it be a really dry reference material isn't super exciting for your customers, but it is super important for models. Now, there's been a lot of research that's been being done in the space about a file type that you can add into your content, whether it be on your website or in your knowledge base, called lm.txt. I'm just going to drop that there in the chat. What a lot of companies are utilizing this for is to be able to try to train models to be able to fetch this text file that exists on your articles instead of actually fetching the article itself. So the text file is just the core information, the stuff that is hyper optimized for machines, while your actual article is utilized for your human readers. Now, there's a lot of varying research that's being done on this. Models are starting to get optimized towards this. So if you are thinking about doing a lot of work to your Zendesk knowledge base over the next 6 to 12 months, I'd highly recommend thinking about starting to keep a copy of these text files on hand just for all of the articles so that you can input them into the metadata of your Zendesk knowledge base and have that as referenceable material. So in the future, models will be able to pull those instead of pulling the actual article itself. Has anybody implemented these LLM text files on their website yet? Awesome. Not yet. So it's very simple. What I would say, yeah, great to see. So I would say, as you guys are thinking about this, these LLM text files, based off of our research, are best if optimized for somewhere around 300 to 400 words in length. Just give it the core information and nothing else. Anticipate us being able to be able to link these and attach these to knowledge-based systems such as Zendesk, Confluence, whatever else here in the very near future as a way of being able to teach models to be able to utilize that instead of utilizing the actual content. Yeah, couldn't agree more with Noah saying they'd love to see Zendesk implement something like this. Yeah, so Larry asked if we have some resources of what it looks like and how to implement it. We'll pass those along in the after action materials after this call. Great. So getting into the justification and decision logic that and how it improves AI retrieval. This is very similar to what I was talking about earlier around the purpose part of the article. So if you're creating an article and you're starting with the purpose of it, you're providing the model the justification and being able to allow the classification system to say, yes, this is the correct materials to be able to pull, or no, it isn't the correct materials to pull, without it having to read the entirety of the article. So always being able to level set what the article's purpose is in the title and in those first 2 to 3 sentences is going to set you up for success like massively. And then avoid marketing tone and internal shorthand. This is a knowledge base. Content is king in regards to just being straight raw documentation. You don't want to bring any fluff to this. You don't want it to be something where it is filled with a variety of information like emojis or tone that is specific to your company, unless you want that to be utilized by your customers when they are searching as well. Now, the caveat to this is that, as always, it's a balancing act. If you're having this be super dry material where it looks like a research paper, that might be great for a model to be able to retrieve off of. But if you're using this content to be able to generate responses in a Copilot solution or a chatbot type solution, not having any tonality in that means that you're going to have to be doing additional work in setting the model's brand and tone profile more effectively because it won't be able to intuit that from the actual content itself. So, something to keep in mind. I would say try to keep it friendly but light and try to get straight to the point in your articles as much as possible. So I'm going to take a moment here to answer JC's question here in the chat. Many of our knowledge bases begin with a question. What is the customer asking? Would that satisfy the justification requirement? It would definitely, if you feel like that question is all encompassing of the entirety of what that article is accomplishing. And what I mean by that is, does that question be answered by that article, or are there other questions that could possibly be answered by that article? So if it is like, your answer, the question that is being asked up at the top is useful to it and maybe is 50% of the purpose of the article, that's not good enough. We need to actually try to encompass the entirety of the article and the purpose of it. Hope that makes sense. Beautiful. So we've done a lot of chats here about how to improve your knowledge base for AI retrieval, for AI use cases over the last year to 2 years of having this AI user group. And some of the quick and easy ones here are obviously clear descriptive titles. Focusing on your well-structured articles, starting with that purpose, getting into bulleted and numerical lists of step-by-step decision-making capabilities of what is needed to be able to accomplish the goal of the article. And then, of course, trying to not keyword jam pack, but also sprinkle in like some. We don't is a balancing act here. We're not trying to optimize super heavily for SEO, but we are trying to at least provide synonyms and descriptions of different terminology that might be specific to your company in the article to increase the semantic retrievability. Yep, great point, Terry, about tags. So what we talk about is leveraging metadata, and one of those is content tags. So labels, categories, sections, and tags are very, very important in number 4. Maintaining content quality and freshness is of course important. And to dig a little bit deeper into that number 5 of content quality and freshness, we are finding that models are actually discounting the value of an article if it has not been touched or updated in 6 months. A lot of that is due to how quickly that models are getting created. And now models are getting to have a better understanding of content and like when it was created based off of like time. So something that models really struggled with in the past is understanding like what is the date. And I know a lot of you have probably been to ChatGPT and have said, hey, what is the day today? And it's always struggled and said, oh, it's sometime in 2024 because that's when the training data stopped. So now that models are getting better at that and are starting to understand it, we're noticing that models are actually preferring content that has happened within 6 months of the date of today. So even if you aren't really doing anything to your articles, it's helpful to go in there and just do a tiny little bump. Also make sure that your content there is fresh. And then structured data and media and multi-language considerations. So we'll be digging into that here in the following slides. And just, going to go running right through these real quick with the clear descriptive titles. Uh, with us going back to what JC was talking about of starting an article with a question, I would actually recommend, instead of starting the article with the question, title the article with the question. And instead, at the top of the article, talk about how you're going to accomplish that goal. That's going to allow for the model to be able to retrieve better semantically on the title and then contextually understand it from the body. Going into well-structured articles, this is what we were just talking about here, purpose-built articles, covering one topic and nothing else. I would highly recommend also for you guys to try to, if you're not today, add more hierarchy into your Zendesk knowledge bases. What I mean by that is categories, sections, and then articles. If you're only keeping things super flat, that's going to make everything weighted essentially the exact same. And models are going to actually have a harder time being able to drill down into the specific topics because it's not going to understand where to look as deeply. So talking about synonyms and keywords a little bit deeper from what we were just speaking about. When we're talking about semantic search here, it relies less on exact keywords and more about the alternate phrasing and the synonyms, especially for us that are in the software space. Software companies love to title their products and their features in weird and interesting ways. And that makes it very difficult for models to understand what it is that it's talking about if a customer isn't referencing it by name. So try to provide a description of the setting or the area of the product that the article is referring to. That's going to help out quite a bit, both on the search engine optimization side as well as the retrievability. So I'm going to pause here for a second, answer Emily's question here in the chat. Any tips for defining scoping and a single article, single topic? Sometimes it can be hard to know if information should be added to an article or created as its own. This is a great question. What I would recommend is that if your article is less than, if the question can be answered in less than 150 words, it's something that I wouldn't put into an article, and I would try to roll up into a larger topic. When you roll it up into a larger topic article, just make sure that you're structuring it into separate pieces. And what we mean by that is purpose and then answer, or question, answer, question, answer. What we find is that models can understand a single article that has numerous questions in it to about 5 or 6 questions in length, as long as it is all servicing the same purpose. So if it's all about authentication and password resets, those are questions that are fine to be added all into one article. But if it's about varying topics, then that's of course going to be something that we want to split up. So hope that helps. Yeah. So Jessica, this is a great one. She says, we've been advised to avoid questions as the title. Do models read questions differently in titles than in a statement? 100% they do. So this is very difficult because this is always going to be a changing thing. And it's always what we're talking about here with the balancing act. We need to think about not only what do models do today, but what are they going to be doing in the future. And the main thing that we've been able to discover, and this is from essentially GPT 3.5 to now at GPT 5 when we're talking about ChatGPT, all of them, all of these different model sets at least have a contextual understanding and have an increase by about 6% in accuracy of retrieval when a question is the title of the article. If you ask me the reasoning why we're not able to figure it out just yet, we just don't have enough data. But it seems that when models are creating the queries to be able to retrieve things, it is understanding contextually when a title is a question more effectively than anything else. So it's not as great for humans though. And that's where these LLM text files that we were referring to earlier in our call might come into play, where we, instead of maybe titling the actual article as the question. Instead, maybe we have that as the title of the LLM text file instead. There's not enough data to be able to say that, but it's an interesting thing that I know there's a lot of people doing research on. Awesome. So Michelle says, we've previously been told that each article should only answer one question. So we can add multiple questions in one article as long as it is clear. Yes. Yes, you can, Michelle. It's just, we say limit it to about 5 or 6, and please make sure that they're all about the same topic. Models have the ability to break those down into single question and answer pairings and contextually understand it. It's also going to increase the likelihood of contextual retrievability of it. Awesome. I'll get to Heather's question here in just a quick moment, but just to be, present on time, I want to get through a couple more of these questions or these tips that we have here. And specifically, this is about leveraging metadata. So I would highly recommend for you, for those of you that are on the professional and the enterprise plan of Zendesk, to leverage content tags. Now, this isn't going to help a ton of semantic searchability, but it is going to help Zendesk's own retrieval system to be able to pull more effectively. So any of you that are using Zendesk AI, I would highly recommend utilizing these content tags. And when we think about the content tags to add, we want these to be natural language tags. We don't want to have this be something that is hyper specific to your company. We're going to want this to be more the broad strokes. So going back to my original example about authentication, you'd want the content tag to be password reset or authentication. You don't want it to be about OAuth 2.0 or single sign-on or something of that sort. You want it to be as high level as possible. Awesome. So I feel like we've covered content quality and freshness quite well as structured data. This is something I've called out in essentially every AI user group that I've done up to this point. When it comes to media, please, please, please be adding alternative text to your images and to your videos. That is going to help models to contextually understand the purpose of that image or that video to the greater article. Awesome. And this is just a quick example here on structure. So instead of us talking about this in a sentence format, we actually want to be doing step-by-step instructions, no matter how small. Now, there's always a balancing act on this, as there is with everything. If you're getting into 20 or 30 steps, that's too much. But we want to take at least drilling down into the main actions as you are going through what would be needed to accomplish a task that the article's purpose is. So for this example of how to update the notification deliveries, instead of just saying go to settings to change the notifications, go to the settings, click on notifications, select the email, SMS, or app, and then explaining when to use it and when not to use it. Cassie asks a great question in the chat. How many steps is the sweet spot? We don't know at this time. All we know is that 20 plus causes massive amounts of hallucinations. I would say try to keep it between 8 and 10, but that's more based off of gut, and we don't have any research around it. Awesome. Getting into the multi-language considerations. Now, this goes back to what we were talking about way at the beginning of our presentation, that the classification preferences that these models are having are very, very much hyper-specific to different languages. So when we go into some of the more Germanic languages, as well as some of the love languages, we actually see that there is a higher preference for brand classifications, which means our knowledge base is going to be more important than it is for something such as English. So even if you aren't going to be supporting customers in those languages, if you have a team that is able to put together some localized content for some of their smaller regions that maybe are based around a Germanic language or a love language, French or Spanish or Portuguese, you're going to do a lot of good for AI retrievability by being able to create a localized content for that. And I'm not sure if some of you have seen this with some of the new reasoning models, but when it is going to search, sometimes you'll see that it's doing the searches in other languages. And that's often because it's trying to figure out what is the most efficient method to be able to pull the most accurate information. So highly recommend that you think about localizing your content into multiple different languages. Beautiful. Awesome. We just cruised through a ton of content very, very quickly here. I have about 15 more minutes. I know that we had this meeting booked for just 30 minutes. But if anyone has any questions or insights or ideas they want to come off of mute and ask them, I'm more than happy to chat about this stuff more in depth. So feel free to drop any questions that you have here in the chat. I'll stick around here for a few minutes and answer them. Otherwise, we'll be passing all of the materials that we talked about here today, recording of the call, and the research studies for all of your review. Awesome. Andre brings up a great question. John asked, with the LLM text files, does that help with the Zendesk generative search, or is that relevant only to outside AI models? It's a great question. At this moment, it's mainly useful for AI models outside of the Zendesk ecosystem. So your ChatGPTs, your Geminis, things of that nature. However, if Zendesk AI is using a foundational model for providing some of those sources, so if it has web search capabilities or RAG retrieval capabilities, it's going to, in the future, be leveraging those LLM text files very heavily. So models are getting trained on it quite heavily. I can only say that that's being done at Anthropic, that I know for a certain, and OpenAI. I don't know if Gemini is doing it. Awesome. Juliana, thank you for bringing Heather's question back up to the surface here. I'm wondering about whether LLMs are allergic to articles that link to one or more other articles. I've heard this can affect how it ingests the information. Too many rabbit holes for it. Absolutely. So essentially, the way that models are doing retrieval is one of two ways. One, it either flattens everything and it chunks it all into a model at once to be able to generate a response, or it uses something that is called tool calling, which means that it's going and it does a search. And then if it feels like it didn't get enough information, it goes and does another search. Essentially, every single one of those links that you're providing, if it is a model that is using tool calling to be able to find that information, it will continue to drop down that chain, and your responses are going to take longer, and it's actually going to have something that happens with models, which is called like the lost in the middle or the needle in the haystack situation, where it gets too much information and then it causes to hallucinate because it doesn't understand everything. Awesome. All righty. Sean asked, do we have any examples of effective and poor examples of articles for AI? We do. We'll pass those over. It's from some of our previous conversations that we've had here in the AI user group. And I'm going to limit it to about 3 more questions here just to be respectful of everybody's time here. So I'll go with Samir's question here. Does the LLM text relevant for AI agents Ultimate? Not at this time, mainly because the AI agents product from Ultimate slash Zendesk is mainly built as a workflow driven system. It doesn't have a ton of flexibility to be able to go and do a ton of searching on its own. That being said, I would highly anticipate that Zendesk will be rolling something out of that sort in the near future. Awesome. Great question from Tiffany Y here. Does the summary option that's within the article editor work the same way as normal content with the Zendesk Advanced AI, or is that weighted more heavily? So the summary option for the article editor is actually a subset of that normal content. So that is actually not something that, at least to my knowledge, is being utilized for any of the AI search capabilities at this time. But I could be wrong on that. So if you know something else, I would love to hear that. Alrighty. Uh, So, what's the best way to optimize for Zendesk AI agents and AI Copilot? Great question. What I would say is focus on three core areas here. One, think about the structure of your knowledge base. So, let's add more hierarchy into it, categories, sections, and articles. We want to be able to provide a purpose-driven description at the top of each of those articles, explain what the purpose of that article is. And I'd even recommend that if you are building into building categories and sections, utilize the description field that lives on those levels. I would assume that Zendesk's own search retrieval is using that information a little bit more semantically. Alrighty, I'm going to answer Sharon's question here, and we'll then kind of close things out here for today. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, message to the Zendesk AI user group. Myself and the greater Zendesk AI user group team are always happy to help. So answering Sharon's question here, I ran into an issue with the limit on using up to 200 knowledge base tags. I created a master list for use. Does this change depending on the type of Zendesk we have? I think that it's a hard limit, unfortunately, at this time, is 200 is the maximum. What I would recommend is that these content tags are best when they are kept as very high level. So think about it more on natural language purposes instead of hyper specific to different areas. So I would say if you have a section that has about 10 articles or more in it, I would anticipate you for that section only needing 5 to maybe 7 content tags. So just think about how you're grouping everything together. Lovely. Awesome. Well, we had a great turnout here today. A couple of quick action items to talk about. One, we love doing these conversations. We've now been doing them for about 2.5 years. We've done a lot of topics. We've done a lot of topics over again, such as today's session. We try to put a little bit of a spin on them, especially with new research that comes out. But if you have any ideas for content, if you want to have more of an informal session where it's more community and we speak about it as a group more effectively, please follow up in the email that we're going to be sending out. There's going to be a Google form in there, one, asking for feedback on the session itself, and then two, for ideas on future content. We love when we get those so that we can try to build stuff that's actually impactful for everybody. So thanks again. Really appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day and hope everyone has a lovely Thursday.